So congratulations, you made it through that interview process and now you got that new job. Now what? Listen in for ideas and some insight with a great panel of teachers on what you should be doing during the summer before your first year. Hello, and welcome to Music Ed All In, the podcast for music education majors and young music education professionals. Coming at you from Northeastern Ohio, I'm your host, Kevin Neese. It's time to go all in. Alrighty, what is going on, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 7 of Music Ed All In. Today we have a very special treat for you as we feature two quality music educators and friends. We have Mr. John Rodesh, who is the director of bands at Western Brown Local Schools down in Mount Orab, Ohio. And we also have John Obringer, who is director of bands at Berwick High School in Berwick, Pennsylvania, which is like southwest of Scranton. Is that right, John?
Yeah, you nailed it, actually.
Oh my gosh, that never happens. Well,
you really know your North Pennsylvania geography. Great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And today we are really lucky to have these two gentlemen because we are going to dive into talking about that summer before your first new gig, which can be a crazy time. And these gentlemen have also presented this information and this content at OMEA Professional Development Conference, and they did a stellar job. And rather than me jabbing and talking your ears off, I thought they would do a much better job of explaining and talking through this and putting your mind at ease and getting you set and prepared for that first gig over the summer. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
So let's talk. When you guys were diving in to your first gig, and I think one of the hardest things to do, and it seems like the easiest, is to like just get a set of keys to where you can just like get started and dive in. So can you talk about like what's the first thing once you have those keys? What should you be doing?
You sending that one to me, John?
Yeah, go ahead, take it, John.
So the first thing I did was I got them as early as possible, and not even, I don't even know if I knew what I was going to do, but something I believe when you do get the keys and when you do get a new gig, just being in the facilities helps you wrap your mind around, okay, what needs done. In my case, I needed to do a lot of cleaning, and I couldn't get a darn thing done until I did that. Now, there were areas that were clean, and I still needed to organize them just so I knew where everything was. And just putting in those hours, digging through drawers and cleaning made me very familiar with where everything was, how everything operated, so that when a kid came and, asked for reads, I knew where they were. Right. So I really familiarized myself with, I work in 2 different buildings. I familiarized myself with the middle school band room and the high school band room and just did a whole lot of cleaning. And that was really square one. I know that's not a fancy answer, but
no, that's a perfect answer.
I did a lot of sweeping and a lot of dusting.
And I think being on the facilities is great. Yeah, just being comfortable in your new environment, being comfortable in your office, making it your home so you feel comfortable spending a lot of time there. But and more so than that, I think meeting the people around you is the most important thing you can do. Getting FaceTime with the administrators and the secretaries and the custodial staff and your colleagues. The more FaceTime you can get in with all those people, the more comfortable you are at asking them for help and asking them questions the minute you're there. So you're definitely right. Just moving in and spending tons of time there. The summer is a very peaceful time to be in a school. It's quiet and it's friendly and everyone's, in a good mood and warm being there. So I think spending a lot of time over the summer is a really great way just to get your comfort level up for that first day of school.
Right. I don't know about you guys, but Vinton County it's an interesting building. And if you've never walked through it before, it's kind of like walking through a fun house because you can go up one set of stairs and you end up walking down a different set, but it's not the same set you walked up. So I remember I just walked the building like probably 5 or 6 times just to like be comfortable. If a kid was like, hey, Mr. Nice, you know what, I got to go to 300 hallway, where is that? And I'd be like, carry the 2, like, you know, try and navigate where the heck it was. So yeah, I think spending time in your building is huge. And being able to access like technology in your building, you know, getting that email, getting that, you know,
Right.
laptop. Did you guys do you have like school laptops like when you first got started?
Yeah, and I think so. I got my keys right away. I mean, I think it was um, mid-May when I got my keys. So I felt like I had a whole summer with access to the building. And then you have things which we even have on the PDF that we're referencing and going to reference, that hopefully will be available to listeners and things like that.
Yeah.
On that PDF, we even include jobs like getting your keys, getting your laptop. Your school ID could be really important. Name badge, all those kind of things are really important. And I think it's really important to stress to your administration that if that transition doesn't normally happen until July or something like that, to make sure they understand that we are not in a normal situation. And our school year usually starts 3-4 weeks before a normal teacher's school year does, so that our month has to be ahead of everybody else's.
Right. At least 3 to 4.
Right.
In reference to that handout, that's why John and I put that at the very top. And I'm looking at it right now. I'm actually going to use it. I'm going to have a new colleague here in several weeks. And that is the first step you got to get out of the way, because kind of like going off of what John said, a lot of those administrators and office people take their vacations in July. And you can't wait till after July because, you know, band camp and all those things are going to be happening. So I was just looking at it right here next to me. That's why we prioritized swipe key, email address, all that kind of stuff
Everything.
first.
Maybe
Because you
not
got to.
for us to talk about the layout of that handout before we start referencing.
and the beauty of this will actually be shared, like when I post this and share this,
Great.
and I'll create like a separate
So,
link thing for
I
them to
think
look at it.
even more so when we did our presentation at OMEA, and we actually were planning on doing it at PMEA conference this year, but
Oh,
rest
yeah.
never actually happened. But
Yeah, right.
so when we created this handout, we thought it was more useful than us actually talking, which is actually seeing this resource that we made.
Right.
What we did was compile a list of every single thing that we thought we had to do over the summer or going into early fall, and we put it into what we thought was a prioritized list. So you'll see we have our little code of P1, P2, P3. It's really funny for some reason. And the P1A means things that are things that are fun, more lighthearted topics, and then things that are P1B are maybe your more serious logistical topics that you might want to mix your A's and your B's together, so you're not just spending a month doing just like dry, budgeting and stuff like that. You're going to mix in some fun topics like show design or band camp game planning and stuff like that. So the P1 is just things you should do first, and then the A and B is the A's are the kind of more lighthearted tasks, and the B's are a little more dry tasks.
I think that's important too, because it's like, although like everybody approaches summer like, hey, it's summer, like kick back, and it's like that's like the busiest time, you know, and just to be able to do like the fun stuff with it as well, rather than just be like boom, 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 boom. I think that's really important to be able to mix in a little bit of the pieces of candy rather than just vegetables, you know.
And we discussed that feeling that you have in your first summer. I don't know if you felt this, Kevin, but you get that first gig, and it's the first time where it's like the leash is off, and you got all these things to do, but you have no idea what they are.
Yeah.
Like,
And
I know I have
and
a million
and you
things to
can make
do.
that list, like you guys talked about a prioritized list, but again, going into it, and I mean, yeah, I think that's a great way just to even sit down and just be like, all right, what are things that I should be doing right now, and just making a list. And you're gonna leave stuff off. It's just what it is, because it's like, but you don't know how to accept, create accessible points to achieve all of those things to get them all done. It's crazy.
Right. So our hope is that with this list, a new teacher can kind of attack all the jobs they have to do rather than wait for those jobs to come to them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Instead of that, you kind of feel blind that first year, not knowing what you need to do. Now we have a list for you where you can kind of approach all of those jobs before they actually are necessarily a priority at the time.
Right. And with that the the school access and, kind of just meeting the people around you. You guys made some really good comments of who you should be talking to. And especially over the summer, the ones that you see so much are definitely like custodial staff. And those are like some of the best interactions like you'll have over the summer. Me and the custodians would always like just, sit around and talk and, catch up a little bit. But that, especially that first summer, it's like, I knew I was going to be asking these people a lot, like all the time. So if you could get, meeting those custodians, they said administrators, other people in your department, if it's your band staff, you have other directors, if it's, just a general music department where you have choral staff, orchestral staff, whatever it may be. Yeah, definitely meeting as many people as you possibly can. I think that's huge.
And I think it kind of makes you more reputable to your administrators too. If they see you, no matter what level you're at, if they see you in the office over the summer, like I remember being in there and seeing my principal every day for 2 weeks. She was like, "You
Yes.
really don't have to be here, right?" It's like, yeah, I got so much I want to do.
Yeah.
And balancing that with getting it done, I got asked to go to Mexican. I think it was like my first weekend, and I was like sweaty, covered in dirt, really like trying to keep my eye on the ball, get stuff done. But when the secretaries and the principal asked the band director to go get lunch, I mean, you put that stuff down and you go make that investment. Kind of what John just said, it makes you reputable to, be a people person. And it was just super fun. That's one memory I have. But yeah, those connections early on, those connections are really important.
Well,
you care and that you're a team player right off the bat.
Exactly.
Right.
You're not even, it's like, yes, they hired a band director, but they also hired a colleague. You know what I mean? Like they want to have somebody they can work with and, engage with, outside of the school day, like getting Mexican food or whatever it may be. That's awesome. So, you've got your building access, you have a lot of like the logistical things moving. You're starting to clean your room, making it more homey to you. And I think one of the next big tasks, you have to meet the the people that you need to get in contact with. So that, your band parents, your kids, basically meet the teacher. Now is a little bit interesting because it might have to happen virtually, which is kind of a bummer. But it's definitely still possible for that to happen. When you guys are doing these meet the teacher things, what would you recommend for somebody? Like, what are things that you should include in that meet and greet, whether it is online like this, like we're doing right now, or in person if you do get that opportunity?
I really think leading up to that, if you're going into a program where actually it could be any type of program, a rebuilding program, maybe where you're the person that is going to come in and build this thing up, or maybe you're following a legendary director. That was the cool thing about our presentation, was John and I came from two different worlds.
Right.
So maybe he can speak to his end of this. But for me, before I had that meeting in person where they could come and hear what I had to say, I made a lot of phone calls. And I know making phone calls is kind of awkward for some people. They prefer to text or they prefer to email. But we just did our senior band awards on the road, and the one girl that we delivered an award to, we kind of reminisced about that time. And I called, and yeah, teenagers might be a little awkward. They don't know who you are. Who's this strange man calling me on the phone and wants to talk about band? But I credit a lot of my early success to that personal touch of making a phone call and introducing yourself. You really might not talk about anything concrete in those conversations, but just doing a little, rah-rah, let's get this thing done, does leave a kid feeling a little bit more comfortable than they might normally do.
Right. And you're gaining so much insight out of that too. You're just kind of feeling out you're feeling out the culture, you're feeling out the vibe of the kids. I mean, you're able to check out a lot of information just simply making a phone call.
Yeah. It's one of those personal things that I think I don't know if we do it enough as we should. I know even during this whole coronavirus thing, I've made more phone calls than I usually do, just because, people miss emails, people don't read emails. Kids might not catch that Google Meet invitation. Making a phone call is kind of like that last, not a last resort, but not a best resort. I mean, it's just another way to catch people. And it really has a more personal touch than an email.
Absolutely. And I think we kind of did come from two different perspectives. And I think I walked into a situation that was much more stable than you did. It just the situation that I was dealt. And when you walk into a situation with a director who's been there a while and has a lot of personal relationships with the families, when you're the new director, before you meet people, a lot of them don't even want to do band anymore. You might lose kids because they know that that person they were counting on is not coming back. So you're going to lose people just from that who don't sign up for band. And we even put on that list there, just compare rosters. Compare your sophomore, junior, and senior roster if you're doing high school, or if you're doing middle school, just your returning grade rosters, and see who's not coming back that was in that ensemble the year before. And that's what I didn't have time to call necessarily all 80 kids in the band program, but I called the ones who didn't, weren't signed up to come back, that were there the year before. And I think just by making a phone call, and I didn't have to say much more than, hello, my name is Mr. Obringer. I'm the new band director at Berwick High School. I noticed your son's not signed up for band. I was wondering if there's anything we can do to change that. And usually it was just as much as, oh, well, now that you've called, maybe he'll sign up. It wasn't like
Exactly.
somebody talk them into it. It was the fact that you called changed their mind right then and there. That's all you do. So I think that's really, really important. And that's no different this year with coronavirus than it is in the past. I didn't knock on anybody's doors. Yeah, it wasn't anything like that. It was just make a phone call. There was no masks involved. It was just phone call, see what they say, and usually they came back. I don't think I really lost any kids after that. It was, besides 8th graders coming up, but it was mostly just make the outreach, and they appreciate that more than anything.
Right.
And you might be on the phone for a while, especially if you talk to the kid and the parent. And this is a different topic, but it goes back to that personal aspect of the job. And I think a lot of people, you leave the pinnacle of your college career, new teachers, and they are on top of their game. They just did all these amazing experiences in undergrad. And then you go teach in rural Ohio, and you're on the phone with parents and kids, and you're not used to really talking to 13, 14-year-olds about band, or you're not used to talking about band with grandma and grandpa or whatever. And it's just so important. It's really invaluable. And that's where some of the humbling aspects of all this can go into. So anyway, yeah.
No, I completely agree. I think I definitely was in more of a situation that John Rodesh was, going into a rural district and kind of taking it by the horns in a developing program that's still establishing its feet. And I know one of the first things that I did, you're contacting people, and all of this was phone. I mean, I was contacting any extra staff that they had. We had a percussion dad who was super involved. So he was the first person that I called, just kind of see what, he was an alumni of the school. So it was really great insight to just get it in the area. I remember calling all of the exec boosters, talking to them and just kind of establishing like, hey, I'm Kevin. I look like I'm 12, but I'm going to be your band director for, this upcoming year. And then I contacted student leaders. So I kind of did it in like a weird structured fashion. But it was to where I kind of did it from like the top down, so that it was a little bit more like, oh, hey, like, have you guys gotten to talk to Mr. Nice yet? He's a cool guy. Well, I hope most of them said that, but they could have been like, who's this schmuck? I don't know. But with that being said, I think, just a simple phone call, just those few minutes on the phone really, really takes you a really, really long way.
And one thing I've learned is that if you wait long enough to contact a family, a parent, or whoever the guardians are, if you wait long enough, it's probably not going to be a positive interaction. If you don't contact them first, your first phone call from them is probably like, I heard you said this to my kid in band today, or
right.
So this is a great opportunity to start fresh on a positive note with everybody. And it really, really does make a difference if your first interaction is, hey, I just want to say hi, rather than, how come you said this about my son, or whatever. So it's just a really great time to take a fresh start and a positive approach to people instead of starting with a negative interaction.
John, I wish when you called me, we had more positive interactions. Most of the time you're just calling to complain.
Yeah.
I gave you that Western Brown shirt. You're even sporting a Western Brown shirt today.
Look at that. Really? Look at that.
Yeah, I keep that man clothed and
we did a jersey trade. He's not even wearing the Berwick Bulldog shirt.
I'm wearing Berwick blue, baby. I didn't even plan it.
Well, I can say I've never gotten a T-shirt from either of your schools,
Oh,
so we'll just leave that there.
well, depending on how that we are represented in this, how we're represented in this podcast, depends on if you get a T-shirt.
If you get a T-shirt or not, you're the real deal. Apparently, I'm not at that stature yet. I'm supporting Nordonia today. I got my Nordonia green on.
There you go. Go Knights.
So go Knights. Let's talk about, the piece of candy, some of the fun stuff you get. You're getting through more of the logistics. You've talked to your band camp staff. If you had them, you're starting to meet all the people you need to meet. Show design stuff. I don't know about you, but I've talked with some people that went into a program. Maybe it was more of a competitive band or something along those lines, where they had already invested thousands of dollars into the show for that year that you're going to teach in. And I remember somebody asked, was like, do I keep this? Do I keep running with this, or do I do something totally different, new? And the worst answer was, I said, I think it honestly depends, are the kids bought into it? Are they, wanting to do it from there? Have you invested it to where it's maybe something you could use it in the future, maybe not this year? So when you guys were doing show design stuff, what were things that you had to tackle, and what were, some of the experiences you had, even though it was the fun part?
Yeah, and let's first of all just branch that out a little bit too, because we wanted to make sure we included more than just the marching band umbrella. So when we talked about this
Right.
aspect, you can consider concert programming for any age level too. Has music already been bought? Have they already talked about some sort of theme for the upcoming concert? Did they promise them, a Disney theme for your spring 5th grade choral concert? Whatever it may be, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that. I think if you have a theme you're really passionate about coming in and doing, then you maybe can go for that. But my answer is that if they've been comfortable with the idea of anything, or if they have been promised something, or if they're expecting something, do that first, because it's not
Right.
a program yet. You don't just show up and get your name plastered on and take that program.
Yeah.
Whatever grade level or type of ensemble it is, that's not yours until you've earned that and proven yourself a little bit. So let's say they've invested money into a marching band show. I would say do it. Let's say they had talked about doing a Disney concert in the upcoming semester. I would say do it. There's going to be plenty of times and chances to program your own concert after that.
Yeah.
So I would say do what they've been promised and do it to the best of your ability. And then you're going to have plenty of chances to insert your own creative spark into the program afterwards.
Yeah, there's not one solution. So if you're stuck with music you maybe don't care for, but the kids know that it's coming and they're excited about it, but maybe your group that you inherit isn't ready to play it, or maybe you don't like that version or whatever. Right. I would like to think that we're all resourceful enough to rewrite parts if we need to, or I don't know, make the adjustments we need to do to maybe make yourself feel a little bit better about the fact you're doing somebody else's thing, but also do exactly what John said, is you got to fulfill those commitments, or you're not really going to win over the kids' trust. I luckily was in a scenario where the music was picked, and I looked at it, and it was way too hard for the group that I was inheriting. But the first thing I did was I asked the upcoming field commander, I said, "Hey, are you excited about this music?" And she was like, "Oh, we don't even know what it is yet." And I was like, and then I could change it. I could make the change that I needed to do. But if she would have said, "Oh yeah, I'm so excited for that," then I would have been rewriting some parts. And I rewrote parts for marching band and concert band a lot that year. Just so that they could feel successful. And that's a whole nother topic. But on the topic of changing things when you go right in, one of my interview questions was, the field commander selection process is completed and we've picked the field commander for next year. Are you going to change that? And I kind of look back are you kidding me?
No,
for a new person,
are you nuts?
for a new person to come in and make something like that and rock the boat is really not smart. The band director at George Washington High School in Charleston, West Virginia.
Yes, yeah.
Mark Hardman. He said I'm paraphrasing, but he said something to the effect of, "You are literally the biggest change and the only change kids really need in that first year. Yes, you're going to do things differently naturally because you're a different person than your predecessor, but you are the only change those kids really need. So keep that in the back of your mind before you start, rocking the boat, like I already said." So
I was really hoping you were going to say the don't change anything but the light bulbs phrase.
oh, I forgot about that one.
Yeah, I guess I have to be the one to say that. I thought
Oh,
you were
well,
going to say that.
That's great.
I
Sometimes
haven't practiced our session. It's been a year. You know, Ohio, we had our conference in Ohio. Pennsylvania canceled this year. I don't know what was up, but they thought they needed to cancel. But
yeah,
Apparently
well,
there's a pandemic.
oh,
something's
is there?
That's what I've heard.
But actually, it's really great you brought up the student leadership there too. This would probably be a good time to talk about student leadership. I actually had the opposite situation. I was fortunate or unfortunate enough, depending on how you look at it, to walk in to a group where the leadership hadn't been selected for the upcoming school year yet. Which I think that's probably the case with any level ensemble. If you're doing, I don't know if middle schools, some do chair placements maybe, or just section leaders for your middle school sections. But I know I had to choose my high school marching band section leaders and drum majors, and I went through and interviewed every single kid that wanted to be a section leader or drum major, which coincidentally is every single kid in the band. So go figure. So I interviewed probably like, I mean, it wasn't every kid. I probably did like 50 interviews with kids, but it was painstaking, but it was a really great way for me to tell them what I thought were important qualities in leaders in the band and kind of set that right up front. That just because maybe you're well respected as the best saxophone player in the section, if you come in and talk about all the wrong things in your interview, it might not be the cut for a brand new person. You have to know what I think are important, and you have to be able to speak about that. So I just think selecting leadership, designing your show, all those things are a great way to show your personality. So if you do get the chance to do those on your own without having that be established and going back on that, if you get to establish those things, they're really great opportunities to portray what you think your priorities are in the program. And I wouldn't take those decisions very lightly. Those are things that you got to put a lot of thought into, and you can really get a lot of things out of that, especially student leadership, which I know John and I talked about as one of our, we think is the most important things in high school teaching, is your student leadership. So I think that's a really great thing to put a lot of thought into and be able to put your message out into the group before the school year even starts.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Like, I know when I was first at Benton County, my first year, my section leaders were picked for me. It was a great group of kids. They were very, very young, though. It's an 8 through 12 ensemble, right? The high school marching band. I had freshmen that were section leaders, and it was so funny. And I didn't mean to say it in like a condescending way. I had a gentleman come up. He's a great kid, awesome. He actually just graduated this year, and he had said, like, hi, small little guy. He was just like, hi, I'm your low brass section leader. I said, oh, that's cool. What grade are you in? He's like, I'm a freshman. And I was like, no, it's funny. What grade are you in? And he was like, I'm a freshman. And I was like, oh my gosh, and there was like two sides of this. I was like, either this could be the worst experience for this kid, having to get thrown into it so young, but I was like, let's try to make this as teachable as possible. And I think it was, great, opportunity for him to learn and lead and do all that awesome stuff.
Yeah,
So,
I had sort of a similar situation where it was a trumpet section. There was only one senior that year.
mm-hmm.
And so that person was just the assumed section leader. And it came out of interviews, and I knew it wasn't going to be a fairly popular decision, but I assigned a junior as the section leader because the senior would just talk about, well, why are you section leader? Well, I am a senior. I've been here 4 years. I've seen it all, done it all. And the junior's like, I'm passionate about the people get on board and doing a good job here. And it was a great chance when people were angry about it. I got to talk to the group about that and say, this is the reasons why. It's just if you're a strong leader and you have a passion for the group, you're going to get rewarded for that. And you're going to fall into those responsibilities. So another great chance just to set a tone for something.
Right. Well, let's kind of get back into some more of the logistics stuff. So, you're getting more comfortable, you're starting to get, established with your program, you're getting more familiar with it. And now you're starting to figure out when is stuff scheduled. You're looking at calendars, you're getting overwhelmed by calendars. When you're looking at these calendars, what are things that you would do, or what specific calendars do you think people should be diving into right off the bat?
Kind of actually, this is one thing that I thought was a really fun topic for me, because I remember this is like the third thing that I did when I got the job before I moved there or anything. I was sitting there on my computer in a coffee shop getting ready to do some work, and I was like, I wonder what the calendar is for the season. I wonder what the schedule is for marching band seasons. Like, I wonder how I get that. And I sat there thinking about it. I was like, who gives me the schedule? And then it kind of hit me. I was like, oh,
Oh, that's me.
maybe I make it. I guess I just like decide that. Like, and it's like really scary the first time you just like type out a date. You know, like I guess that's going to be Wednesday, July 1st.
I hope people show up. That's always the feeling
right.
that I had when I was creating something new. It was like, well, I hope they come.
I hope they're free. Hope everyone's free on Wednesdays. But it really is scary to like plan out a marching band season from, you know, starting July 1st and going until September, whatever, or October. And then it's scary, you know, if you're a middle school choral director, if you're doing after school rehearsals, or if you have concerts to schedule and stuff like that. Parents want that stuff. Usually they're asking for it a year in advance or 9 months in advance or something like that.
Right.
And if you're getting that job and that stuff's not scheduled yet, you got to start going in and checking some other dates to make sure you're not conflicting with stuff. But then you got to like fight for dates. I think in music, we're always fighting for field time, concert hall time, rehearsal room time. You got to right away go in and get those dates scheduled and come up with a smart plan and a smart calendar, and then get that into their hands right away, because they're going to want that band camp schedule, or they're going to want those after school choral or orchestra rehearsal schedules immediately. And that's on you to decide when those things are.
And looking at a blank calendar and realizing how scary it is kind of daunting at first. But Kevin, when you asked about what does your first meeting look like, and when I think about calendars, the thing I do literally in my brain, I guess, is I like picture, okay, what is that literally going to look like? What is the kids' perception of that going to be? So when we talk about that first meeting, no matter how tough it's going to be, no matter how many phone calls and emails and follow-up phone calls and emails you have to do, it's great during that first meeting to have all that, if you can, because for a parent to come in, like John said, and go, okay, what's the schedule going to be with the new person? And for you to have a nice organized packet, folder of stuff, whatever, with band camp checklist, you know, concert schedule, practice schedule, after school schedule, all that stuff is really important. But you do have to navigate. I remember, and I have to do it every year, I have my district calendar, because these are all separate documents, by the way.
This is never a one-stop shop
thing.
Yeah, and
so I've got a tab. What'd you say, John?
Some of them are online. They're just pencil written on your secretary.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. I've got my fine arts calendar, the athletic calendar, the district calendar, all on there. In addition to our OMEA district calendar, because you don't want to schedule something on top of that. Right. Trying to think what else.
I know I would always have the facility availability up as well.
Right. For sure.
And thinking about all that, I mean, it's so funny. You think back to your first year teaching, you're like, wow, remember that scenario? And when I think about, you know, even band camp, it wasn't my band camp schedule. I inherited it and I didn't really want to change much of it. But now going into year 4, the band camp schedule is something that I've morphed, you know, from that, and I'm very pleased with it. So a lot of these scheduling problems probably aren't going to be resolved your first year. You definitely need to assert your dominance a little bit and make sure that you're respected when it comes to these conversations. But just little victories each year can really add up. We have practice time on our stadium turf now in my 3rd year. We did not have that my first year by any means. Luckily, we have a really awesome practice field, but you got to just chip away at that. You can't rock the boat. I know I've said rock the boat like 40 times now, but Dr. Sook at OU always says evolution, not revolution. And that certainly is like with everything, even the calendar.
And I think even more so, there can be a battle with the band itself, with the members of the band changing that calendar. This is one thing that I wanted to do since day one that I didn't establish until this year, was just adding more marching band practices. We have a pretty, you know, competition is pretty important to our kids and our families. And So we take it pretty seriously. So for the high school marching band, we were doing one practice a week, and then one, well, it was really two, because we did one on the weekends too. But I was like, we really need more after school rehearsals than just one a week. So the idea of introducing that to the kids was like one thing. Then it was like dropping a cigarette on a pile of oil. I don't know. uh, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you know what I mean.
No, I get it.
Really afraid to do that one. And so just little things like maybe the first year I'll schedule an all-day Saturday camp. Maybe this year I'll schedule just one Monday practice, and then the next year is like, let's just do it every other Monday. And then this year was like, all right, now we're up to 3 practices a year, guy, or 3 practices a week, because this is how bands function. So it's just kind of like you said, evolution, not revolution. It's just like introducing small changes to the calendar every year, picking your battles, fighting a battle every year, with the athletic department, with your kids themselves, with the administration, whatever it is, fighting small battles every day to try to eventually get that calendar the way you want it. Because I think the calendar it could be your biggest hindrance in a successful season if it's not functioning the way you want it to.
Yeah, I remember my first year for band camp, and I did the same schedule. I stuck with what the previous director had established, and the camp was 3 weeks long. And it wasn't like, oh, let's do like 9 to 12. It was like 8 to 6 every day, 3 weeks. And I was like, all right, let's do it. And obviously, this whole time, all I did was take notes on things that I liked about it and things that I didn't. And I just referred back to them when it got to January, and we had to start scheduling for the following summer. And I think one of the best things that I did, though, I surveyed the kids and I said, all right, I have an idea. And I just said, what would you think if band camp were like a new member day, a refresher day, and then we have a full week of camp with sectionals maybe thrown in towards the beginning. And the kids they were funny. They were just being a ride. I had kids that were like, no, new members should have to suffer the wrath of 3 weeks. Or, they were hilarious, but they were like, but really though, a week would be much better. And I was like, I don't even know how after we made that change, which was pretty drastic. That was after year one. I said, let's try this. If it doesn't work, obviously we'll, go back, reassess, and see what we can go from there. The kids loved it. They were like, I feel like we got more done. And I was like, I agree, because, it was, less straining on the mind and the body, and they were able to really just dive in and do what we needed to do in that shorter period of time.
It's funny how when you explain those changes to them, they're so aware of the benefits of it. If you tell them this is why I want to do it, they'll get to the end of that season and be like, you know what, that was really cool how that was different. I know when I talked about changing our practice schedule after school, we were practicing 6 to 9 on Wednesdays on a field with no lights. So by the end of the season, it's dark by like 6:45, and we're going back inside and just doing music, which we did during the day anyways. So it was like, guys, I think we're going to change the schedule this year, so we're not practicing 2 hours and 15 minutes in the dark every Wednesday night. Like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And then we're practicing Mondays 3 to 5, and everyone's happy. it's right.
Just the littlest things bring so much joy and efficiency. It's great.
Yeah, the efficiency is the big thing. Like if you can make that switch and it brings efficiency, it's the right move.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Well, let's keep chugging along. You guys, we had talked about, talking with booster organizations, a little bit, and this kind of lumps in together. You eventually have to buy stuff for your program, whether it's, booster, organized, whether it's through the school and talking purchase orders. What advice might you give to somebody who's trying to figure out, how the purchase order thing works, or maybe what funds are available in boosters? Maybe talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think my biggest piece of advice in the purchasing, well, two things, is just figuring out how the process works. When we did our presentation, we included examples of how you do it at each one of our schools, but I think the process is probably different for each school.
Sure.
So just first day, go in and say, if I need to buy something, how do I do that? And they're going to walk you through it. And it's probably, it's usually fairly complicated, but you can figure it out. It's not just like, yeah, ask for money and I'll hand you the credit card. It's always way more difficult than that. So figuring out how that process works is really important from the get-go, because you definitely don't want to do that the wrong way. The minute you spend money the way they don't want you to, that's big doo-doo. So I would say just figure that out in the first place. And then the other big thing is just with your budgeting. I'm a big believer in just smart budgeting. Now that's only when it comes to school stuff. John and I have talked before how we both have Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus,
That's
Amazon,
what.
but I don't watch any of them.
Yeah,
So
if you're here to learn about student loans or personal finances, John and I
wrong place. Yeah.
we'll talk about booster budgeting all day. But
yeah.
yeah.
So I think with the budget, the smartest thing I can think of that luckily I did was just to go ask for records of all the purchases from the year before. Because your secretary should have that, a record of everything that the former director had purchased. And the reason why is because you're going to get to the end of the year and have giant purchases that you never thought of. Usually every like March is when we get our uniforms dry cleaned, and that's like $1,600. And I was just kind of spending through, and then I was like, I better check what happens in March or April. And it's like, whoa, good thing I have $1,600 left in the budget. Those things are really important. And then you might not realize that if you're buying reeds for your kids, you're probably spending $2,000 on reeds for a year. If you're, whatever, if you need to purchase music for a spring concert, you want to know if you're able to do that or not. You can't just spend those funds without planning ahead that far in advance. Because I know, like for me, our booster budget is more money than I've ever actually seen in my life. And if I were to, like, you get there, like, oh, I can, like, who's going to spend $30,000? But then you start spending stuff and it racks up. So just records of what were purchased the year before and putting together a budget plan instead of just spending money is really, really important, because when you run out of money, school districts don't give you more until the next year. You're just out.
Exactly.
Right. We've talked boosters in the midst of this conversation, and I know, like, when I talk to younger directors, especially, and that subject comes up, it's almost always linked to money. And so many times I hear people say, well, the boosters have the checkbook, or the boosters, our treasurer doesn't like that I do this or whatever.
Right.
And I had a scenario that was pretty rough when it came to boosters, specifically with money. As far as our school district, I'm very fortunate that I'm in a district that is very, very supportive, and they understood the needs of the program financially, and they've always been super helpful. But if you don't have control over that, as far as the boosters are concerned, that's really not a good picture. So I really encourage any new teacher to navigate those waters so that the parents understand, your boosters might be a nonprofit organization that has a president and a treasurer and all those things. But as the band director, you're the chairperson of that board, or you're the executor of that program. I mean, you're the director. You call the shots on what gets spent and what gets saved. Right. Unfortunately, my predecessor and our booster president at the time, they would have this back and forth about like my predecessor didn't even know how much money the boosters had. And when she would ask for something, they would say, why? Why do you need that? That's not the environment that is going to help the kids be successful. Yeah. If I'm requesting, usually the way it works is I text, or in our board meetings, I say, hey, this is our expenditures for the next month. And I say it in a way that recognizes the fact that they hold the positions and run the organization, the booster side of things. But I say, I'm requesting we do this, and this is why we need it. And when you treat parents with respect and also let them know, listen, I'm here to do my best for the kids in the program, usually that trust falls into place. But so often I hear of this director booster riff. As a director, you need to go in there and figure that out, or you're really, we've all heard the stories where, it was the parents. It was the parents that drove me out. Well, control it, figure it out. If you like that job and you like your kids, figure it out. If that takes rewriting the Constitution, which is maybe what I had to do, that's fine. But now we have an awesome team of parents. Last night, we just did an online fundraiser last night. The treasurer is texting me and saying, doing all this stuff and being that like all-star band mom that we all are going to have. And if you get through the muddy waters, better days will come when it comes to band boosters.
And I think just like anything, it's really difficult as a young director to walk in there and gain that respect unless you're really well prepared for it. I'm not trying to say that I was, I think I was moderately prepared for it, but it's really hard unless you over prepare. And I don't think I recognize that right away, that parents will be friendly to you, hopefully, hopefully, but they won't really have that respect that they know you're going to do the right thing in every situation unless you've shown preparation and understanding of what that is. And that's where, actually, if you saw in our presentation, the last chance you quote came in. It was I was
Oh
talking
yeah.
about I was talking about the football coach who preached composure and preached like doing the appropriate things on the field and not getting into a fight, and his players really respected that. But then the minute that he got into a fight with the referees on the field, the players like verbally said, "Well, if you're not going to do that, we're not following you." That they instantly lost their cool the minute he did, because he wasn't practicing what he preached. I think if you take the lead with your booster organization from the get-go and you show that you've looked over the budget, you understand what's going on there, you can mention what the priorities are for that year. If you tell them that we need to make this large purchase that we don't normally need, and here's why, then you can have a little bit more say with your boosters, and they'll respect you a little bit more for that. If you go in and say, I want this, don't ask questions. I mean, no one in the right mind would say that. But if they just go in and demand something without showing the proper respect to the boosters or showing the proper confidence in themselves, I think you can get yourself into a lot of trouble that way. Is just
Yeah.
by practicing what you preach and doing your due diligence or research.
I think, just literally like collaboration, be transparent, and uh, be user friendly, and make it flexible and show the rationale. I think is the biggest aspect of it, and and it's always so funny. Like my boosters, we were thankful. At Benton County, we had the concession stand, for home football games. And, they had asked me, what I thought about it. And I was like, you're making, quality money right now. And they had asked, what I would do. And it was cool to have, really supportive parents. But again, I know not everybody's in that situation where they are always asking the director for input, for little things. But
Mm-hmm.
it just showed that they put trust in what I was doing. And I was, beyond thankful for that.
Kevin, you just mentioned rationale for what you do, or
Right.
for the purchases you need to make, and this just came to my head because I've done it several times, and I think it's super important. When you're dealing with your district side of things and you're asking your superintendent for money, that rationale piece is super important. But I know I did this coming from an undergrad where you're typing papers, you want every last detail covered, and you type a big essay. You don't need to do that for your superintendent. At least not my superintendent. He has told me, give me your 3-year plan. I want 3 years. I don't want 5 years. I don't want 10 years. Give me your 3-year plan, or give me 3 bullet points on why you need that new line of sousaphones or whatever. And if you think about all of the things that our principals and superintendents and district treasurers have to deal with, I'm not saying the band's not important. It certainly is.
But when they're
But it's
looking at
not.
tubas and they're like, is this the most important thing that we need for our district at this point? Yeah, no, I totally
Right.
get it.
Right. And so you got to keep it short, concise. If you have the superintendent's ear for 5 minutes, you better get your point across in those 5 minutes. Or if you've got that one chance to send that email, you better make sure in the first 30 seconds he can look at it and say, he or she can look at it and go, yeah, okay, this is legit. He put his rationale in there, and the price tag's not too much. So I don't know. When you just said rationale, that kind of sparked that idea in my head.
And I think not crying wolf too often is part of that too. Not if you're not going to ask
Right.
something every day,
Exactly.
every week. If you're not constantly demanding things, when you demand something, it means a lot more. I heard someone say, it's not the exact quote, but they said like the majority of things you say to your principal should just be good morning. Like you shouldn't be going in
Exactly.
for the question. You go in there and like smile and talk to them and have a good conversation. If you're always going in there with a problem or something you're needing, it's not good for your relationship.
That you couldn't have said that any better.
Well, that's what, John, if I were to sum up, like, if a first year teacher to walk in the room right now and say, how do I survive, or how do I be successful? John, what you just said, I just look at him and say, choose your battles. Like you literally can't fight a good fight on every single thing. You can in your own back band office and, scheme and do all that. But when it comes to talking to administrators, definitely choose your battles on what you want to go for, what you want to ask questions about, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
No, I think that nail on the head, man. Job well done.
You nailed it, John.
I appreciate that, guys. It's nice to be built up for once.
Yeah. Let's talk about another piece of candy. We've been talking vegetables for a little bit. So all of this time, you're thinking you're doing all of these things, and I know I was doing these from 3 hours away. I was doing this from like my, where I grew up, and then the job that I had got was 3.5 hours away. And I think you guys would agree the early start of this, you don't have a place to live yet. You're not looking at that. What are some like personal budget things that you should be thinking about? What are some things you should be considering as you are going into like, oh, I need to find a place to live. Can I afford that? Do I need a roommate? Like what were some of your guys' experiences?
We already said don't ask us about that, Kevin. We're not going to that side.
Yeah, you're talking to two guys that eat so much fast food. We spend so much money eating out, and yeah, you don't want to ask us.
I think everybody's first year is like that. I remember my predecessor said, "You will be upset at yourself how many times you go through the drive-through on your way."
Oh,
yeah. I was like, oh man.
The big thing to remember is that you're not really getting paid that much.
Yeah, truthfully, no, and
that's not big at anything. It's just the truth. Like your first job, no matter where you are, it's probably going to be pretty low relative to where you're living as a teacher. I mean, if in my area, cost of living's not that high, but the salary ain't that high either. So it's really not. You gotta be careful, because I thought, oh my God, I'm getting paid that much, and I thought that's more money than I ever seen in my life. But I luckily got an apartment that was like holes in the windows and cigarette burns in the carpets and stuff like that I could afford for a little while. I guess my biggest advice, because I'm not good at this topic, would just be spend as little as you can until you get a good grasp on how much money that actually is.
Right.
I agree. I remember sitting back home, my parents' house, on the floor with a pad of paper, and I mean, my dad almost got annoyed at me, but I kept saying, "Dad, what are the things I'm not thinking about that are going to cost money?" And like I knew the basics, rent, utilities, student loan payment, eventually, all that kind of stuff. But there were other things. I mean, I totally went over my head that I needed to pay renter's insurance for that apartment, or all that kind of stuff. So, but don't be afraid to ask the business person in the district specifically how much you're going to make. Band directors, music directors, we should have those little stipends or supplemental positions. You need to ask about all that. And I'm taking this from my dad. He always said, aim high. When you go from gross to net pay, aim high. Act like your taxes are going to be a little higher than they're probably going to be, just so you create a little bit of a safety net. So yeah, you got to ask those questions, and don't be afraid to do it. I think people get weirded out when they talk about money sometimes. And
I think it's okay to ask money. Like obviously you've been offered the job, you're hired. Once you have that under your belt, it's okay to be like, all right, so what exactly am I going to be making?
There's people in the office whose only job is to pay you,
Exactly.
At personal finances. So you ask those people that question, they're not like, how dare you ask that? That's their job.
Right. Never be afraid to email them and call them. And they're usually like, this is a little stereotyping, they're usually like the sweetest old people that like work in those offices, and you need to get to know them. I mean, they've got all the information on the books and the money. So you charm them a little bit. Maybe they add a little bit more to your paycheck after you ask. I don't know.
Always Janet something or other, and she handles payroll. Emails from her twice a week. But what John said was probably the most important thing. Just ask your dad. He'll handle it.
Yeah. Gather insight, ask your folks, your family, people who've been doing it, ask, other band directors. But I remember I think a great fusion, when in doubt, spend low. But then when you're thinking about what things may cost, assume high. I know I had an awful car in college. It was a PT Cruiser, and I thought it was going to last me through my first 5 years of teaching. And I literally got hired at Benton County. The next day it broke down. And I was like, I need to get a new car. and I don't have a place to live and all. Like, it was just, let's check off how many life events at once. First job, first new car that I had to buy myself, like all of these things. So when in doubt, again, I think assuming that you're going to be spending more for utilities and stuff, but then try to limit your spending as much as you possibly can. So let's kind of dive back into some more logistic stuff. We talked about, kind of cleaning and getting our room set up and situated, and, kind of talking about things that you may have to do in the fall. We talked about some calendars and schedule stuff like that. I remember one of the logistic things that is different in both districts that I've worked in is how to request like busing and, how to go about whether you're allowed to schedule a certain event. I don't know what kind of maybe pushback or experiences you guys had, but I remember, having to get, special like band shows, like board approved and things like that. It was a little different in both places that I've been. So maybe talk about maybe some requests that you had to make, whether it was bus related, trips, if you had to go on a trip in your first year, whatever, anything along those lines.
Yeah, and I think that's probably so drastically different state to state as far as, or school to school as far as how to get a bus. I know where I teach, almost all the bus companies are private bus companies that aren't associated with the school.
Right.
So, like, if you want a school bus to a football game, you have to call the company and request a bus and get a price quote and buy it with your budget. It's not like the school owns the school buses and you just schedule a trip.
That's interesting.
That is wild.
Isn't it? It was very different, but it doesn't, like, the school buses don't say Berwick High School on the side. I don't want to give anyone free ads, but they say Gallagher Bus Company on the side of them. So it's like,
I was hoping you were taking your kids on a Greyhound. I hope you guys.
we're chartering to and from.
I'm picturing like the jail buses from Shawshank Redemption or something. That
no, we only the Berwick band only private contracts Wi-Fi accessible buses and
outlets.
No, so it's just a matter of fact of just like asking your secretary or principal how that happens, or asking a colleague how to do that, and just doing it. I think if I might just morph this question into something different, would just be to talk about a trip. I mean, I think we both
trips.
I did a trip my first year that was pre-announced but not scheduled by any means. So planning the trip. I mean, I planned a trip for the music department with no travel agent or anything like that. We just did the trip, their own planning, and that involved like obviously making an itinerary for every single minute of that trip and planning all the buses, getting price quotes from the hotel and the tickets for Cedar Point and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was just thinking about every minute of that trip and figuring out how much it's going to cost and dividing that by the budget that we have to charge the kids. I mean, that was the biggest thing. And I think the reality is that's one of those things you figure out when you have to do it. And you just have to be very, very careful with all expenses like that. You just have to triple check any numbers that you put together anytime that you are requesting money from kids or purchasing something for your trip or whatever it might be. You just have to be very, very careful handling those finances, and make sure you get the right figures and make sure you have the money for things before you plan anything like that.
Right.
I learned with buses specifically that if you get all the requests done at the beginning, you are going to love yourself, because your future self is going to hate you if you don't. Because my first year, I would do them like weekly or maybe every other week. And then once I forgot. Luckily, our transportation people were, super helpful, and it wasn't a big deal. But what I started doing in a filing cabinet is I would just keep a ton of blank ones, and then we eventually digitized them in Google Drive. But it's much easier in June when you're stuck in quarantine to plug and chug all that information and then just spit it out of the printer and just send it all at once. That also, if you need a signature on that, luckily most of the time ours don't, but if you do need a signature on it and you just come with, here's all of our stuff, that's, again, if you get 5 minutes with your principal, it's good to just get it out of the way. Don't go bug your principal every week to sign a bus request. He or she has more important matters.
I wish I had someone to say that. That's good advice.
Yeah, what?
That's good. Nice job. I'm just giving you a high five. That was great.
Thanks, John.
And that, I think that kind of brings us back to a topic that we started our presentation out just by giving 20 minutes on the importance of planning and doing stuff over the summer. I mean, that's why we called our presentation the summer before year one, because we were really stressing the importance of doing everything that you can do over the summer instead of trying to handle it during the week. Because like we always said, like the week is for putting out fires. You're gonna handle everything you can
Yes.
do ahead of time. And if you're trying to spend like a Thursday prep period um, writing a bus request, probably not what you need to be doing that Thursday. You're probably gonna rather spend that time fixing a tenor saxophone or handling, like, I don't know, writing up a detention slip or something like that, or answering 100 emails that you got that day. Like your day and all your free time throughout the day is going to be putting out fires, and it's especially if you get a marching band or if you're doing a musical or even like jazz band or show choir or whatever. It might be that like until 6 o'clock after school you're putting out fires and you're answering parent emails and stuff like that. So that's why we put together this list of everything that can be done over the summer. Because although you could do bus requests week to week and you could fill out purchase orders week to week, if you can do that stuff over the summer, it's really nice when you get to a like Thursday night and you can go home because you don't have a pile of paperwork on your desk that could have been done 2 months ago. So that was our real thing, was my favorite term, which is front loading, which is just doing all the work
Yes.
like months in advance so that you can kind of just roll downhill the rest of the time
Yeah.
and everything for unravels for you.
I joke with my students that when past Mr. Rodesh doesn't do a good job, present Mr. Rodesh gets really mad at past Mr. Rodesh. So if you can, you know, what he just said, get all that stuff done early, your future self will help you. And I wonder, it'd be interesting to know if there's ever a time we can quantify or find data on what causes burnout. You know, is it the parents, is it the kids, or is it all the little administrative crap we have to do?
All the
And
logistic work.
I bet if we did a better job, you know, in the off season, and I know that there really isn't an off season with any music director, but
Right.
if we did that front loading and enjoyed that Thursday night, I wonder how much of that, you know, burnout, stress, whatever, would minimize, because you know, the job really is 80 or 85% administrative.
And then, yeah, that
And
last chunk is music.
yeah, right. So I've never read anything on it. I would really be interested to hear what other people say about what John just spoke of.
Yeah, it's amazing, especially as a first year teacher, how you kind of, I feel like by the time I got past Christmas, you're just halfway through the spring semester, you kind of almost lose the ability to have a night off. Like you're so used to every night having so many things to do that you get that feeling, like once you get all that stuff done, you get that feeling like, oh, what, I should be doing something right now, right? And it's like that kind of feeling I think is what causes me burnout, is when it's like I feel like I can't not do something because I'm always doing something. It's just not a good feeling to have. And if you never get there, I mean, I'm sure everyone does, but if you ideally shoot to never get that far behind that you have stuff you have to do, I think that would really help out with mental stress throughout the year.
Yeah, I think, you know, and again, you know, they talk about, you know, front loading your summers, you know, just to where you can enjoy the year, you know, where you can, you know, get to go home. I know year one that you guys had talked about burnout, like each night. I mean, I worked like 45 minutes away from, you know, where I lived. So, I mean, you're accounting that in your drive home. I mean, it might be late nights. You have pep band, you know, it goes till 9:30, 9:45. There, you know, there was days, you know, you're coming home at 11 o'clock midnight on a weekday, not like a Friday night football game. That could have been like a normal routine. And I think the biggest thing to, you know, is, you know, yeah, we're talking about like all these things that you should be doing and considering and thinking about over the summer. It's like, you're going to fall on your face a couple times in the process, and you're going to make good mistakes. I'll share one. We had talked about, you know, planning trips a little bit ago. I had planned a trip to Cedar Point with my kids. It was, you know, a fun trip. The kids were great. Behavior was awesome. They performed well. We did a band show that weekend as well. We get to the hotel and I'm passing out room keys, and I did all the room assignments. That was the one thing the travel agent said, could you do this? And I said, yeah, no problem. And I passed out all the room keys, and I realized I didn't get a room for myself. So that was just one of those moments that I was like, all right, this was a good learning moment. It was a mistake. And I mean, my band parents, thank God I had great band dads who just laughed it off and were like, all right, come and sleep with us, or whatever. But I mean, there's going to be stupid stuff like that. It's inevitable, and you're going to learn through mistakes, and you're going to trip yourself up sometimes. But then you get to laugh about it a few years later.
Yeah, our first away football game, everything went great. I was super nervous about it, and then everything was going great. Halftime comes, we're headed down to the field. Kids are looking good in the uniforms. I'm excited to get that show on the field. They're like line up in the end zone. I'm about to tell the drum line to march off, and they start marching down the field. And then I go, well, something's missing here. So I never thought that somebody has to go up in the box and like introduce the band to the crowd as they go across.
Dude, that is literally, I still do that. I always forget
I know.
to give the announcer our stuff. Always.
Some dad's driving the truck and just like, oh, can I write something on a napkin for you to say as they're walking? That's my one. I can never remember that, man. I don't know why.
That's funny.
Well, my colleague knows that I do that all the time because he sees me run around the stadium like a madman every time I forget. But I feel a little better now. I feel better now that somebody else has that too. Thanks, John.
I'm here for you, John. Anytime you need.
You're building me up with your mistakes.
Yep. That's so fun.
Hannah Montana said it at a young age. Everybody makes mistakes.
That was your first show at Berwick, wasn't it?
Didn't you do Hannah Montana show? Yeah, it's called the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it was awesome. The music wasn't picked before John got there. That's the first show he picked for his kids, and
no, it was picked. I said we're not doing that horse nonsense. We're doing Hannah Montana.
Yep, and he talked about setting the tone earlier, and look where he's at now.
And John Obringer set the band tone for the rest of his life. He changed the standard of what is quality band literature.
At the end, wasn't it that thing that you came up with, the color guard got rid of their wigs and then they were Miley Cyrus? They were Hannah Montana the whole show.
Yeah, and the drum major was Billy Ray.
Oh man, this is too good.
That's awesome.
That's a great one to put in your pocket, though. Actually, that's a great theme.
I'll keep it. I'll keep it in the back of my mind.
Write it down.
But I'll be sure to give that John Obringer stamp of approval. I'll be like, John Obringer came up with this idea. Patent John O.
Yeah, he's starting to write shows now. Check out John's Weebly, Hannah Montana, Best of Both Worlds. Show design. Did Trey Sona?
Gosh. Well, yeah, we could call that a segue.
Is that what you want to call it?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about the other side of the job when you're getting established. You got most of the logistic work taken out care of, and you're starting to figure out like what media stuff, getting your name out there. And kind of like the PR side of the job. What were some, maybe challenges or things that you guys went up against when you were getting out, getting the band or, getting your guys' name out there?
It was pretty important to me to take advantage of social media. Parents love seeing stuff on Facebook about their kids. And I didn't do it my first year, but I created a band Instagram, and that was like the cookie or the piece of candy for the kids. So I post announcements or pictures of their performances on social media. That's probably a no-brainer when it comes to the age we live in, be on social media. Just my advice to anybody that's starting that is just proofread your stuff and make sure it looks professional. I'm sure we've all seen, tweets and stuff from schools and organizations where there's a typo or something weird, but social media is one way I did it. You just talked about kind of PR. It's not so much media related, but I really felt it was important that the image of the program in person was important, as I think most people do. But we didn't have summer uniforms. The kids were in kind of mismatched T-shirts at Meet the Team and all that before I got here, and luckily, I have a super supportive athletic director, and he paid for our summer uniforms the first year. And for everybody to just see the new band with the new director, we didn't even play a note yet. but the kids were standing at attention when Meet the Team started, and that was some progress too. And they saw brand new band polos and summer uniforms. First impressions, as we all know, are super important. And, whatever you can do to display a positive public image, everybody's going to love it. The band can really become an ambassador for the school that the principals and the administrators and everybody relies on. If the band looks sharp and sounds good, or the choir looks sharp and sounds good, that's really important. John, did you think I was going to go a different route? You pointed at me.
I pointed at you because you're good at that stuff, and I'm not.
No. I'm kind of sometimes over the top on Facebook, I think, when it comes to the stuff I put on there for my band. But I know that I get a lot of feedback on it. Parents, what do parents do when they're sitting at home while Susie's practicing her chromatic scale? They're sitting on Facebook, their parents are on Facebook, and they like seeing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I when you're looking at, like the PR aspect of the job, I think this is really important going into year one though, too, because, like you said, John, first impressions are really big. And it's just like when the band's walking down, like you said, they're all in their new gear. It's like, oh, wow, this director's, really taking the time. And it's something so simple like that, just a little bit of a revamp. Or maybe you're doing a local parade that the band hasn't done in a number of years. I know that was a big thing, at Benton County. They had done the 4th of July parade for decades, and then they took a break from it. And then they had asked me, they're like, could you bring that back? I was like, yeah, I'd be happy to. And we were able to do it. And you would have thought I gave everybody $1 million. Like they were so appreciative.
The band never did Meet the Team before I got there. And we were like 28 members strong that first year. And we played the fight song and like We Will Rock You or something real easy. And that just changed everything. We also played for a huge population of people because we had all the fall sports athletes and their families there. And I talked about school pride and all that. And that really was something that set the tone, something that John talked about earlier. That's just super important. Don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone and ask people, hey, can the band be at this? Can the band show up to this and be a part of it? I think that's super important. We changed the hats my first year. We didn't get new uniforms by any means, but we just changed the hats. And everybody thought we had new uniforms. And that just blew everybody's mind. They're like, oh my gosh, the new band director got us new uniforms and the band looks so much different. We went from Aussie style hats to Shakos with plumes. And that was like the coolest thing. And just whatever you can do to sharpen up the image. Don't change traditions. Don't mess with colors. Don't mess with logos. Don't mess with that kind of stuff unless you're convinced it's an improvement and people will buy into it. But the image thing, John, you just got new uniforms too, right?
We did, yeah. I think, like you're saying, new uniforms is huge. Like that's like in a small town, that's the talk of the town when the band gets new uniforms.
Right.
Like the first football game. That's one thing that I feel like was a good move was just when we got new uniforms. I thought they looked really sharp. They were a pretty progressive uniform for our small town, I think, but I really liked them. And I was like, I remember I was designing that new uniform, and the guy came in. He was like this sweet old man named Paul, and I was talking to him. Paul was like, he's like, what do you like? I was like, well, I'm trying to get something that the town likes. And he looks at me just like, John, forget what the town wants. So this is you do. I was like, all right, Paul. So I designed a uniform I really liked, and I like really thought it was cool. And the town actually really liked it too, and for a progressive uniform. But the big thing was just like that first football game. It was 90 degrees, but I was like, we're gonna show up in those new uniforms, guys. Like it's hot outside. We're obviously not gonna put you in danger and make you sit there and sweat the whole time, but like we're gonna show up and at least wear them in the stands for the first like quarter, and then if we take them off and don't wear them the rest of the game, fine. But the first football game of the year, everyone's excited, everyone's there, the crowd's buzzing, and they see the band come in new uniforms, and they're just like, wow, those are really, really sharp. So that was really cool. And I think the other side of that is just even putting the uniform thing aside for a second. Just when you're a young teacher starting out, especially if you're doing marching band, anytime that you're taking a group into public, making sure that the kids are professional and acting like impressive adults is probably the bigger thing. Like when they sit in stands, sit in an organized manner. If they're unloading a truck, making sure they're not goofing around and kicking rocks over the place and stuff like that. Just like making sure the kids are disciplined enough in public that the crowd's going to say, okay, that they're listening to that guy and they're paying attention to what he or she says, and they're, you know, not acting like animals in public. Because that's one thing that I don't think maybe people don't realize it when they act good, but they definitely realize it when they don't act professionally. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want that on your reputation as kids ruining your reputation or the reputation of the band for you.
We actually talk about expectations for your program on a previous episode, so you guys should check that out. Fun fact. But no, I think that's totally legit in the fusion of both of what you guys said. I think the image that you are creating, that you are broadcasting out, not only in person, but on social media, you want to make sure that they are lining up with the culture that you're creating, and to where anybody goes up and, they see a Berwick kid and they're like, those Berwick band kids are awesome. They're always doing what they need to be doing. Or those, that Bronco band or whatever, down at Western Brown, they're, those kids look always so sharp. They're always so polite. Like those are hands down the best compliments I've ever gotten as a director. Not like, oh, wow, your kids play the crap out of that eighth note run in this show. No, like when they say your kids were so well behaved and they were just really nice, they kept up, picked up after themselves. We really appreciate that. That's the best. No contest.
Absolutely.
But so kind of moving towards the end of this, because I know we've been going over an hour strong, and I know when we're talking about this stuff, it's like, there's never a conversation. This conversation could literally go on for days if we wanted it to, to talk about everything you needed to
I actually
do.
brought my sleeping bag into my office. I thought we were
you brought a cot, you were ready to go.
I thought we were talking all night.
I have to pee, so I'm on the opposite.
Opposite. So we'll kind of close out with, I think one of the most helpful things that any new teacher can do is utilize any sort of a resource, whether that's, mentor teachers you had, whether that's directors in your area, maybe it's your OMEA or your MEA district, depending on what state you're in, and just utilizing those. So what were some things that helped you guys out tremendously, getting it through that summer, or, getting into that, first start of the fall? What were some, great helpful things that, benefited you in a great way?
This is not my official answer, but it is an answer that just came to my head. Luckily, I had a friend that was going through the same thing, and I'm not like literally calling John and being like, and even though we were at totally different schools and totally different scenarios, just being like, hey, did you deal with this? There can't be any ego or pride involved when you are fresh out and you're trying to figure it out. You got to ask questions. So, John, I'm looking forward to your more articulate, better answer.
Yeah,
but seriously, I
didn't have anybody to lean on, man. I couldn't talk to anybody about what I was going. No, I think I was actually going to say that too. I'm not just being. I was going to say that too.
That's adorable, guys.
Going through things together definitely made it a lot easier. But like, we have very opposite opinions on everything. usually.
Yeah.
Like,
that's totally, so. No, continue. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. That's a great comment. Great point.
Like we don't have the same perspectives on most things, or at least the same like initial reaction to most things. I think we both. Usually when we talk, we boil down to the same agreement on something.
Right.
But like when you react to something initially, I'm the exact opposite. And I think we were both able to bounce things off each other and like either calm each other down or present a perspective that was a better answer than one I had thought of, or vice versa. Not that he ever like took my advice, but at least. So it really was a big help. And then besides that, I think I talk about it a lot, and I had a pretty unique perspective where I followed up a retiring director who stayed in the area, who was like great with me. And that was really the biggest advantage that I could have imagined, was having that guiding hand there. So, that would be the best thing that I would say. And I hope, I would hope that any director would be able to call the person that they're following up and ask for advice and work on those things. But in some situations you can't. But I would say that, yes, someone that's going through at the same time, but more so someone who went through it before you, to at least answer questions and offer you perspectives. Whether or not you agree with it is up to you, but a different perspective is always a big help.
Yeah, I think, how you said you had very, very different perspectives. You had different, mindsets and opinions about things. I think sometimes we gravitate towards what we know all the time. And we're like, oh, well, I know so-and-so is not going to cut me up too bad, so I'll call them up first.
Right. Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like, what are you really going to gain out of that, down the road? I remember my mentor teacher, Rod Miller, shout out to him. There was things that we would definitely disagree on, like even in the midst of student teaching, but we would joke and have like a mini argument about it. And he'd be like, hey, you want to go grab lunch now? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. Like, it was always good to have that, difference of opinion, but we both knew where each other were coming from. And, we, supported each other through it. And it was always really nice. But yeah, there's getting a difference of opinion, I think, is huge. And just finding those mentors, finding people that are going through it at the same time. Those are, valuable assets that you want to keep, near and dear to your heart and near and dear to your phone so you can pick them up and call them, whatever it may be.
And especially your music colleagues too. I know that I have a ton of music colleagues at this school. Some of them are marching band or just other band staff. And we have different opinions a lot too. And that's pretty touchy, especially as a young director, to come in and be in charge of the program and have someone who's older than you differ opinion. But then to be able to hear that and tell, like, make sure they understand that you appreciate that opinion, but you're not always going to, fall into what they say. You're going to differ. And if you differ, then it's, the head director does get final say in things. Things like that. And then also, like, if you have a choral colleague or if you're a choral and you have a band colleague, I'd say often those relationships might be a little bit more explosive than others, but it's because those are very different priorities that each teacher has, and those priorities don't line up always. So I would say just making sure that you handle those relationships in a calm and intelligent, professional way. Because as a young teacher coming in, you might be trying to prove that you're, just as important or relevant or just as capable or whatever. But you got to be professional first when you work with somebody else.
Yeah, and those directors might not, those other music directors or colleagues, I mean, if you're out in the middle of rural, wherever, you might not be right. You might be the person. You might be the music person. You then need to get out of your comfort zone and call the choir director from the school down the road. And I always said, like, we're in a profession where we like to perform. We like to show off. Musicians are opinionated people. Nobody's going to shy away from giving you their advice. I mean, we want to hear ourselves give that advice and mentor people. There's going to be somebody in your area, if not your district, that's going to be helpful to you. And even the people that maybe, like, you get a little bit of good advice from them every once in a while, you're still learning something. I mean, I learned something from every teacher in this building, from the chemistry person, or what to do, what not to do. And when you show those people that attention, even if you might not care for everything that's coming out of their mouth, you're still building relationships to some extent, and you're still learning. So yeah, you just got to be a team player. That goes back way to the beginning about just being personal to the people. Don't be down in your band cave or your choir cave, stuck down there. You do need to dive in the pool and be a part of the rest of the school community.
Teamwork makes the dream work, baby.
That was his second year show.
Well, I think that's a perfect stopping point. And I think the big thing, if you gained out of anything from today, is, you're all in this together. Congrats on getting that first gig. For those people that are listening, definitely, go after stuff, try and plan in the summer, get as much done and knocked out as you can, so that when you do get to that point in the middle of the year where you need to pick up a phone and ask a friend, what the heck do I do next? It won't be nearly as overwhelming for you. So it has been a great privilege to have Mr. Rodesh and Mr. Obringer on the show. And we hope you guys enjoyed your time with us today. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Take it easy. Hey guys, thanks again so much for listening. If you liked this video, please feel free to subscribe. If you're more of a visual person, feel free to subscribe right on YouTube. If you're more of just wanting an audio, if you're that person that likes to ride in their car, be sure to check out Buzzsprout, iTunes, and Spotify. If you like to email, feel free to email musiced.allin@gmail.com. Don't forget to like the Music Ed All In Facebook page for updates, trailers, and more. Take it easy, gang, and always go all in.